do some of the announcements. So we'll wait for people to get a seat. If somebody has a red Honda GCV 2325, it's in the front circle in front of the convent, but the workmen have to, and it's parked in front of the convent, and the workmen have to get in there. So if you have a red Honda QCV 2325, we're asking if you would move that car. Thank you. There are seats up here. As soon as I finish the announcements, we're going to be asking you to turn the candle on at your table. If you have one of those, like the fat candle, it's underneath the candle where you turn it on. And if you have the long tapered ones, just turn the knob. But it's when I'm finished. Thank you. All right, we have just a few announcements before we begin. First of all, we want you to know that at lunchtime, our great kitchen staff will be putting everything on the table, so we do not have to get up to get lunch. Our Justice Coordinator, Susan Wilcox, is asking this following announcement. You received an email yesterday about our justice action this weekend regarding a congressional bill to end migrant child detention. And hopefully you saw the information table outside the chapel here, which has stuff on it. The issue is more prominent in the news because the current administration has announced plans to cut funds for any education or recreation for the thousands of children in migrant detentions. At lunchtime, letters will be placed at our table for you to sign and write your address. These letters then will be hand-delivered to the congressional office in D.C. on Wednesday as part of the week action to end child detention and to close the largest facility in Homestead, Florida. And if you have any other questions, Susan Wilcox is here. Susan, would you just raise your hand? She's in the back. We are all happy to have Carol, but Beth Johnson asked that we just say that she was hoping to be here today too, but she could not get out of an engagement that she had previously, but she thinks that we are so lucky to have Carol here. We will now begin with the prayer.
If one person at the table can please light the candle. If you have a round candle, the switch is on the bottom. And if you have the higher taper, just turn the flame piece. If we can just center ourselves as we begin with prayer.
A reading from the book of Acts. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them the ability. If we didn't know, we certainly know it now, as the second chapter of Acts unfolds. This is no tame God who comes to us, no safe and predictable deity. This is a God whose loving sometimes takes the form of scorching. Before he left, Jesus told his friends he would send them the advocate, the comforter. Now we see this comforter coming as wind, as flame, reminding us that comfort is not always comfortable. For it takes itself known in community, where we find the most searing challenges and the deepest blessings we will ever know.
Wide open, secret fire inside, burning within from the dawn of our time. We bear the flame divine. Hearts wide open, sacred fire inside, presence of love. Lantern in the night, open hearts on fire, burning bright, sacred fire, love alive, into the dawn, all light with fire, a light which transforms night to day. This light shines on, our eyes now see, behold communion near. Hearts wide open, sacred fire inside, burning within from the dawn of all time. We bear the flame divine. Hearts wide open, sacred fire inside, presence of love we offer all the world like a lamp.
A blessing for Pentecost Day. Here's one thing you must understand about this blessing. It's not for you alone. It is stubborn about this. Do not even try to lay hold of it if you are by yourself, thinking you can carry it on your own. To bear this blessing, you must first take yourself to a place where everyone does not look like you or think like you, a place where they do not believe precisely as you believe, where their thoughts and ideas and gestures are not exact echoes of your own. Bring your sorrow, bring your grief, bring your fear, bring your weariness and pain, your disgust at how broken the world is, how fractured, how vivid. By this fighting, its wars, its hungers, its penchant for power, its ceaseless repetition of the history it refuses to rise above.
I will not tell you this blessing will fix all that. But in the place where you have gathered, wait, watch, listen. Lay aside your inability to be surprised, your resistance to what you do not understand. See then whether this blessing turns to flame on your tongue, sets you to speaking what you cannot fathom, or opens your ear to a language beyond your imagining, that comes as a knowing in your bones, a clarity in your heart, that tells you this is the reason we were made, for this ache that finally opens us for this struggle, this grace that scorches us toward one another and into the blazing day.
Wide open, sacred fire inside, burning within from the dawn of all time. We bear the flame divine, hearts wide open, sacred fire inside. Presence of love we offer the world, like a lantern in the night. Open hearts on fire, burning bright, sacred fire, love alive.
Good morning. Welcome to all here and to all who are joining us live streaming. Aren't we fortunate to be able to gather together on the eve of Pentecost, just like those early disciples? I doubt that the time in that room was as joyous and full of laughter and conversation that we just had. Maybe that's because they didn't have Danish and coffee and they hadn't put all their extra stuff in Tisa's truck. But I do believe that we can identify with some of the sadness in that room. Their feelings of sadness as they realize Jesus is no longer with them. Confusion, realizing, why did he have to leave us? He told us to receive power from the Spirit to be his witnesses to the ends of the earth. Trying to use their minds and figure it all out just led them together to be bewildered and probably increased their anxiety, which I am sure they shared with one another, adding to their apprehension. Yet they waited together, watched, listened, set aside their inability to be surprised, their resistance to what they did not understand, and allowed the eyes of their hearts to be enlightened. The Spirit brought great changes in the lives of those early inspired people. They were enabled and empowered to understand and to speak to the differences within the human community and proclaim God's Spirit as faithful to God's continuous creation. All of us today know some of that same sadness, realizing that many persons, places, and things we have held dear no longer are part of our lives, as we try so hard to see the new emerging. What does it all mean? What will the future bring? We will not find the answers with our minds and our reasoning alone. We can only truly begin to know deep in our bones if we open our hearts and attend to the stirrings deep within our souls, and as we listen to the stirrings deep within the hearts of others. It is the Spirit revealing to us what is the hope that belongs to our call. Simply, we are called to trust an unknown future to a known God. But we are who we are. Of course, we want to know, how can we do this? What will be the outcomes? Give me a timeline. And who's going to do it? Well, I'm not going to answer those questions for you. But we are indeed fortunate to have someone who can encourage us and give us confidence to simply trust and find ways to listen deeply for what the Spirit is telling us. Our sister from Philadelphia, Carol's in. Carol, first and foremost, a teacher. She earned her doctorate in curriculum development and educational foundations from the University of North Carolina. She was a research fellow at the Episcopal Divinity School and Harvard University on the topic of leadership and transformation. I should have taken that course, Carol. She worked as an education program director for Global Education Associates and served as the main representative of the Congregations of St. Joseph, an NGO with the Economic and Social Council at the UN, representing 15,000 Sisters of St. Joseph who live and minister in 57 countries, and knew our Sister Gloria Garcia well. Carol has served on her congregational leadership team and in the presidency of LCWR. As if that wasn't enough, after that, she worked as a senior vice president for mission with Plant Moran, working with congregations as they discerned the future of their mission and charism, fully living religious life in transformational times. She is currently executive director of LCWR, coming to us via Amtrak and the LIRR from Silver Springs, Maryland. Carol is not a stranger to us. She has inspired and challenged us as a speaker in the past, and also worked with our school administrators and educators. Her wealth of experience, her keen sense of engaging in the transformation of religious life, is only surpassed by the wisdom her mother passed on to her, and the life lessons she learned from her beloved niece, Kira, as a young child. I'd be surprised if we don't hear those names today. So, Carol, we welcome you back, and we open our minds and hearts to you in our time with you today.
Well, good morning. How are you? All right, that's enough for today. It's too lovely of a day to be inside, right? However, after that introduction, my mother would say, "Don't you dare walk out of this room," you know. Get myself organized here. This is lovely. Can you see the slides back and forth? It's like being in Star Trek. It's great. And hello to everyone who's out there in live stream world. Truly, you have the best seats in the house. You know? Plus, you can change the channel. Although we can change the channel here too, mentally. Anyhow, I'm absolutely delighted to be with you. Thank you for inviting me. I try to remember the kinds of things my mother taught me and to only go where you're invited. And so I do thank you for inviting me. I believe you have one or two handouts at your place. One is the little agenda, Trust an Unknown Future to a Known God, and on the back of it, or a separate page, is something I hope you recognize from your vision statement from chapter 1982. Oh my goodness, all those years ago, and look how alive those words still are. And then the hymn, One Spirit, One Church, that I thought we could use to hold us together for today. So, first and foremost, of course, a thank you for the invitation. A thank you for the opportunity to be with, as my one grandniece used to say. She said, I think whenever you're with the Sisters of St. Joseph, you really like it the best. She said, I think you like them best, you know, which of course I do. So thank you for inviting me home, actually. So I really am delighted to be able to be with you. And I also want to thank you for insisting on paying attention to the outside world by the announcement that was made in terms of the child detention issue and the work that is on that back table out in the hallway there. Thank you for insisting that whenever we come together, the world that we're focused on is not only in this room, it's the larger world. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to be at home. And thank you for insisting that the outside world is part of why we are gathered. Helen mentioned my dear mom, who has been with God since January of 2011. But I am sure, as I've shared with you before, if she was standing right here, she would say to Helen, oh, that's all well and good what you just said. Sit down and I'm going to tell them who she really is, you know. And briefly, who she really is I'm also trying to figure out what does it mean in my own mind and heart and in my own life to trust an unknown future to a known God. So I'm here today to be with you in the conversation. There are no experts. There is no template out there about what ought we do. We are really in a moment where the Spirit that moves among each of us and all of us is going to show us the way. So I think my mom would mostly say to you that I come to you as a sister, 51 years in religious life, looking pretty good, don't you think? Okay. My grandniece Mackenzie cannot believe that I am so old. Absolutely cannot believe. She told me when I was only 65 that I was really 70. And I said, no, I'm not, Ken. Yes, you are, Aunt Carol. I said, no, I'm not. I'm really not. Yes, you are, Aunt Carol. I said, how do you think that I'm 70? Aunt Carol, we learned rounding in math class in school. So then, of course, I got the whole rule about rounding, you know. Aunt Carol, when the unit's digit is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, you must go up to the next multiple of 5. You cannot go down. Some people think when you're at the 5, you can go whichever way you want, but you can't. Well, 4 years later, I can tell you that what she would say to me is, there's no way I have a choice now. At age 69, I'm definitely 70. Mackenzie would also say that she can't believe how many sisters there are in the country. Because, you know, I send my travel thing to my sister, and she puts it on the refrigerator. So Mackenzie started to kind of pay attention to that. And every once in a while she would say, oh, you know, you're going to be with, and she would understand the different congregations differently. But whenever she saw CSSJ, that's when she would say, oh, she said, you're going to be with your sisters, with your sisters. But she said to me one time, several years ago, she said, if there's so many sisters in the world, or in the country, how come there isn't more joy and happiness? And there's so many good people, so many sisters. And I said, well, that's a good question. And she said, well, actually, don't you love when they say actually? Actually, maybe if there weren't so many sisters, it would be worse, you know? So, what I thought we might do today, I was invited to be with you for this conversation that is twofold, and so I thought we would have two parts of the conversation. This morning, I thought we would take the first part of your chapter vision statement from 1982. We are now at a new stage of our journey. Please raise your hand if you are personally at a new stage of your own journey. Yes. Okay. Please raise your hand again if you expect to be at a new stage tomorrow. We are always at a new stage of our journey. So I thought we would use that as our kind of framework for this morning and really have an experience of communal discernment. So I'd like to help invite that this morning. And then this afternoon after lunch, we voiced our vision for the future. And again, an experience of communal discernment. But this afternoon's framework will really be about religious life. And so the questions for the discernment experience this morning, you can see on your paper there. How would you describe your personal experience of contemplation and discernment? And how would you describe your communal experience of contemplation and discernment? And I have a process that I would like to invite you to that I hope will be helpful in terms of practicing this process. Because here's the takeaway. We are not good at this, you know? And it is very challenging for us because really, when was the last time you were not good at something, you know? And Sister Delia Delio, you know that name? One of the things she says, many things she says that helps me in that kind of thought. She says that she experiences women religious in the States especially as being victims of their own success. We have been so good at so much, rolling it out, you know, with a plan and a timeline, just like Helen said, and strategies and objectives, and it's been wonderful. And very little of that is helpful at this moment in time. Those are not the processes that are needed. They're helpful, but it's not the place to start. And so it's a challenge, at least for me, and I think for many of us, to really kind of marry this notion of contemplation and communal discernment. And so I'd like to invite you into some practice of that. This afternoon we'll do practice of that, but we'll do it around the questions there at the bottom of the page. 2 essential dimensions or elements of living religious life now and into the next 5 to 10 years. Now, I know there's at least one person here that just said, oh, I'm not coming back after lunch. I'm not even going to be here 10 years from now. Okay? All right? You cannot do that. If you are in the chair today, you are responsible for helping to create 5 to 10 years from now. And the reason why that timeline is so important is what we're seeing from the balcony level. You know what I mean when I say that? From the balcony view of religious life, at least in the LCWR congregations, and the others too, because this comes from the National Religious Retirement Office, NRRO, and the picture, the profile they have, is that by 2024, how many years from that is now? 5. there will be half as many women religious as there are today. Okay? And so in 10 years from now, very different picture. And this is not about numbers. This is about the transforming power of God and the transformation of this life form. It is not about we don't have enough people, okay? So the conversation this afternoon, the discernment this afternoon will be around what are two essential elements of living this religious life at this unprecedented moment. And the thing about this, sisters and brother, this time only comes around in the Catholic tradition about every 300 years. Okay? So I don't think anybody in this room was around for the last turn of this, okay? We're just really living at a remarkable moment in the evolution of the cosmos and the planet and so forth, and in the evolution of religious life. Just happens to be happening on our watch. So what are the two essential elements that you will discern this afternoon of living the life? And then the second question there, as you prepare for your chapter, name two essential elements for leading religious life into the next 5 to 10 years. And so my hope for the day is that you will certainly enjoy it and relax, and this is all God's work, so just let God do what she wants to do. Okay, this is not a project or homework or a task. It's an experience. Communal discernment around what does it mean to be living lives of contemplation without being a contemplative. Okay, we get that, all right? You probably didn't do this because you're very astute on Long Island. But let me tell you, there are other groups out there, as soon as you said contemplation, they were like, we are not contemplatives, we are active religion. Thank God you don't do that. And that has pretty much died its death across the country. We've slowly gotten that this contemplative core of our life is just that, it is core. So this experience this morning of contemplation and discernment, and this afternoon about living and leading religious life at this moment where so much is going on. Okay? How does that sound? That's good, because I don't have plan B, so I'm glad that's okay. Right? And if it stops being okay, just tell Helen, you know. No, Helen's left, all right? So, okay. Yeah. Okay. That's an essential element for leading religious life right now. I'm only teasing. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just set a little context, and I've got some pictures here. Obviously, always, the context, especially for religious life, but for all of us now on this planet, the cosmos is the context. We have got to be at that level of our heart in order to be in this moment. Absolutely beautiful, isn't it? Just to look at it. I mean, talk about pure mystery. And it's a picture of a black hole. Do you remember that a little while ago? And let's hear it for the young graduate student, the woman who figured out the 8 algorithms in order to get the cameras to take the picture of the black hole for the first time. Okay, so, but black holes are fascinating. You know, they're these entities that just kind of draw everything. The scientific language is they suck in all the energy around it, even light. And one of the things that fascinates me about that, especially in light of the eve of Pentecost, is the power of the Spirit to kind of do the same thing to us. Just draw us into our core, where we need to be at this moment in time. I love this picture, okay? And there are some pictures that say under that arrow, detail. You know? So we are a detail, you know, in this large, swirling, wonderful action of God called the cosmos. The detail, of course, helps us to realize that we are, in fact, individuals, you know, and then the circles out, as you can see, you know, part of a family, part of a community, city, county, state, nation, planet, and so forth, which is nothing more, nothing less than the scientific insight of a holon. And one of the best examples that I've come to, so I can understand it, because I can't wrap my head around this all the time, One of the best examples of a holon is this little description here. That if you take a letter of the alphabet, the letter A, it is a whole entity in and of itself. Doesn't need anything else. B, in its B-ness, is a whole thing. C, okay? It's also part of something larger. In the same way that a letter is part of a word. A word is usually within a sentence. A sentence is in a paragraph. Paragraph is on a page. Page is in a chapter. Chapter is in a book. Book's in a library. And the libraries are in libraries. Okay? So a good example of that first thing that's up there, the letter, is a whole entity in and of itself, and it's also a part of something larger. The reason I'm saying that for us is that this movement in religious life right now is a holon. There's something happening in this life itself, but there's something happening beyond this life. There's something happening in the culture, in the country, in the world, in the church, and so forth. And part of the discernment and contemplation is for us to be able to literally place ourselves where we are. And so I offer this just as a help that, and again, you don't do this, but I'll tell you there are quite a few other groups of sisters who have this unspoken sense that we're in this moment in religious life because we did something wrong. You know, we didn't have good vocation people. You know, I mean, we stopped wearing the habit. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there. And what I'm offering is in a spirit of contemplation to allow God to draw us into the core of God and to be there and listen, which is discernment. We have to understand that we are part of something much larger that God is doing. And if we don't understand that, then the little letter A, B, or C, or Philadelphia, Brentwood, or the United States, Canada, it becomes the whole thing, which is the definition, of course, of arrogance. Okay? When one thinks one is the center of the universe. So holons are, it's a very important insight and understanding. I want you to just take a minute and just look at this detail. This is a detail in the universe. And just kind of call to mind all of the parts that you know that are glorious and celebrating and just an expression of just such beauty and joy, and all of the parts of this whole that are broken and wounded and crying and hurt. Just bring them into your mind and heart. And I would imagine we could spend the rest of the day just with this picture in front of us, in prayer and intercession, and try to answer the question, what is ours to do right now in response to this whole? And then we can do the same thing with this part of a whole, this detail, this place that most of us call home. And again, just a moment to bring into our mind and heart everything that is celebratory and everything that cries out in pain. Then, of course, you recognize that, I hope. Okay. The great state, Pennsylvania. Oh, no, sorry. Now we're at the center of the universe, finally. Okay. And again, just keep bringing, everything that is out there comes in here. As Thich Nhat Hanh and Thomas Merton teach us, everything that's out there is in our heart. More detail. More detail. Beautiful detail, huh? Yeah, it is. It's gorgeous, sisters. Gorgeous. Are there associates here, by the way? Yes? Okay, sisters and associates. Thank you. more detail. And then, of course, there is another detail, if you will, that's close to our heart because of who we are as women religious. So again, a moment to just kind of bring in all of the celebratory ways that the gospel is alive in the world and all of the heartbreak that is in the world, caused by, in particular cases, by the institutional church. So, the context is always Scripture, which you see at the top of the page. Very powerful time that you're gathered here between last Sunday, favorite gospel in the world, right? John 17. So that they may be one as we are one. Right up until tomorrow, Pentecost Sunday. That we might be kindled in the hands of God, so that we too can be fire. So always Scripture, always the outer world, always the inner world, and always beauty. By the way, I love these hearts. Did you see this heart up here? Absolutely love it. As it was being processed in, all I could think of was my Jewish friends who I learned from them why our Jewish brothers and sisters always pray that the Word of God might be on our hearts. That's how they pray all the time. Whenever they, read the Scriptures, it always ends with, and may God's Word be on our heart. And, here am I, so now reminded. And I'm like, do you have the wrong preposition in there, It's like, should be in your heart, Oh, no. We always pray that God's Word might be on our heart, so that when our hearts are broken, open, all of God's Word might pour in. So I was thinking about how heartbroken we are on lots of levels. And it's so that God's Word, might pour in a new way. So what I'd like to do is, with some help here, I'd like to go to a little bit, just a very quick YouTube, before we have this conversation about contemplation and discernment. I want to show you an example of what does it look like when two people are engaged with each other in a contemplative moment, and they are discerning, and they are being transformed by the experience. Okay?
I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time.
Yeah, they're trying to get the volume. You may have seen this. It's been viewed millions of times, just in the past 3 days.
They need to work on that, right? Yes. Did you understand it though? No. Uh-huh. Oh, no. Not this one. This is the grand finale of it. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh, yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was like that. Yeah. Yeah. Like, go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. And then it was like, you know what I'm saying? I was like, what in the world? But don't do it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So it's a father and his son, and the father has just finished watching the finale of Empire, the show Empire. And the story is that the little boy was down on the floor, and the father started saying something to him. He crawled up on the sofa, and they had this conversation, you know. But did you notice that they were both being transformed by that, weren't they? Absolutely. That is what contemplation and discernment, I'm not saying you should act like that, but that's what it does. It takes you to a place that you almost don't even need words. It didn't matter that that father couldn't understand that little boy. You know, it did not matter. When you have that kind of capacity, you are getting close to mystery. And what we saw there was the mystery of a father so in love with his son, and vice versa, that it didn't matter whether they could actually understand each other. That wasn't the point. The point was something else was happening there. So what I want to invite you to consider as we step into the conversation for this morning is this whole notion of what Simon Sinek talks about in his work on leadership. Is he uses this three-circle diagram, and his thesis is that we need to start with why. We need to start with why. The why is in the center of the circle. The how is the second circle. And the what is the third largest circle. And basically what he says is that most people and most organizations can tell you what they do. What are their practical activities at the largest outside circle. Very few can tell you how they do it, which is the middle circle. And the how is all about the process and the means that they use. And even fewer than that can tell you what's in the center, which is the answer to why, which is always the purpose and the vision. And so when we talk about communal discernment at a new stage in our journey, and why it's important that we learn together how to do this, it's not about the what, although I'm going to try to offer you some practical ways of doing it. And it's not even about the how, which for us is all the relationship. It is about the why. Why is contemplation and discernment so important right now? So before we do a little exercise, I want to start with the why. Why is contemplation and discernment at this moment of the pastoral mystery journey? Why is it so important? Well, very simply because we have to understand that we are not only in a time of change, and some of you have heard me say this before. Definition of change straight out is that it uses the past as the reference point. And one of the best examples we have in religious life right now in the States, and also in Canada, in Ireland, and in Australia, in the global north, is what are we doing with our temporal goods, our buildings and things like that. Paint them a different color, put different people in them as users. That's all good. It's change. We use the past as the reference point. There isn't a choice on our part about change. Change is going to come whether you like it or not. Anybody not agree? Take a look in the mirror, okay? We really don't have a whole lot of control over change, okay? Change is about external activity for the most part. It's about various tweaks. You know, I can change my diet, change my hair color, change the purpose of this room. It's all good. Change is not really at a deeper level by way of substance. It's important, but it's not substantial. And the most important thing about change are the last two phrases up there. When you change something, you end up with the same form and the same function. I still have a head of hair, it still covers my head, and it is now gray instead of brown. That is a change. Okay? We still have the building, different people in it, and different use. It's still the building. Same form, same function. Okay? And please notice my neutral tone is not good or bad, right or wrong. That's what changes. Times of transformation, very different character. Very different character. Transformation is when you use the future as a reference point, which is why trusting an unknown future to a known God is just about the only way for us to go. Because the only person, if you will, that has a sense of the future, we believe, is God. So when we say that we're committing ourselves to the transformational process, it has something to do with using the future as our reference point. And what's in the future in terms of a piece of paper and a plan? Nada. Nothing. Nothing that we can figure out anyhow. It's very challenging. Transformation is also the capacity for us to choose it or not. Transformation will not just happen. In other words, we can say no to it. We can say, I don't want that kind of change. I don't want that kind of journey. Transformation is much more an internal activity. Something happens to us inside, just like that father and son. Something happened to them personally, and then in their relationship as father and son. We couldn't see it necessarily. It was internal. Transformation is always essential and core stuff. It's not about painting a room a different color. Transformation is about essential core kinds of things. And again, the last two phrases up here are probably the most helpful, at least to me, to hold on to this. In transformation, you always end up with new form and new function. In other words, if you didn't know what it was previously, you would never recognize it in its transformational stage. Which is why a caterpillar to a butterfly is the best example of transformation. The future is the reference point, no choice, internal activity. The core of that caterpillar is totally given over. Mackenzie once told me, or asked me, she said, you know what happens in metamorphosis, Aunt Carol? And I said, no, which was a mistake, of course, because I got the whole 4th grade science lesson. Aunt Carol, do you know what goes on in the chrysalis? I said, no. She said, it's disgusting. And she proceeded to tell me they now have MRIs of what goes on in a chrysalis. And, you know, in her little 4th grade mind, that was a good description, you know. Everything that the caterpillar was is gone. And out of that goneness, something totally other gets created. If you did not know that a butterfly was once a caterpillar, when you look at a butterfly, you wouldn't believe anybody if they told you that was once a caterpillar. Okay? So that's why it's a good example of transformation. The reason I'm saying this is we are in a time of transformation across all sectors, religions, not just the Catholic Church is having troubles, you know, okay? Again, across all religions, across politics, economies, governments, education, healthcare, families, you name it. There is a huge shift going on, especially in Western culture. It's a time of transformation. And so our approach usually, and this works for times of change, is to have discussion, debate. Anybody here good at that? Yes, we're very good at that, you know. Typically, women religious could discuss their way in and out of anything, you know. And it's about decision. And this is not a time for decision. This is a time for discernment. What do I mean by that? Discussions and debate and decisions are rational processes. Now, believe me, I'm not saying leave your rational self outside. Discussion, debate, decisions are very left-brained, which is good, very logical. It's outcomes-based, it's predictable, and mostly it can be controlled. That's the part we like. We want to be in charge, which is not a bad thing. Okay? We're in times, though, where being in charge and predicting everything and saying if we do A, then B and C will happen. We're not in those kind of times. If we do A, shoes and turkeys might happen, you know? We have absolutely no clarity about doing A and it will produce B and C. It just is not that way. Contemplation, like that father and son were doing, is taking a long, that's the best definition of contemplation, to take a long, loving look at reality, at the church, at religious life, at Brentwood, at Philadelphia, at President Trump, at the southern border, at Saudi Arabia. I mean, whatever it is, take a long, loving look at it until you can see what God sees. Now, you try that for a little while on what you're looking at. Okay? Contemplation is, so it's a practice. It's a practice. Contemplation also demands stillness of mind and heart and will. Oh my goodness, what a trifecta that is for us. Very left-brained, very successful, first world, global north, very high achievers. Very hard for us to still our mind, our heart, and our will. Contemplation also demands a silence inside of us and beyond us. Probably the silence outside of us is easier to achieve than the silence inside of us. And the last 2 points here are probably the takeaways, at least, that helps me. Contemplation is about listen, listen, listen. 2 ears, 1 mouth, for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we speak. Contemplation demands listening more than speaking. And finally there, the word contemplation itself, contemplare, means to carve out a space for the sacred. So part of the work, sisters and associates, and my brother who's here, part of the work of contemplation right now is to keep carving out a space in our own mind and heart and will, personally and then collectively, for God to take up residence and for God to lead this journey. This is not a journey that we're in charge of. And the more we can get out of the way, the more apt we might be of having God take us where God needs us to be. And more than likely, it's not going to look anything like what we think it should. That's always a good little test. If something turns out the way we think it probably should, then we might want to be a little dubious about whether it is of God or of me. Discernment. One of the things about discernment, and my dear sister Karen Doyle, who lived with your sisters for many years in Jamaica, she's a retreat director. One of the things she said about discernment most recently is that in a discernment process, you do not make up your mind. That's a decision. There's no making up your mind in a discernment process. A discernment process is always between goods. It's always between this call or this call. And it's not a matter of this call is calling me to God and this one's calling me to evil. No. Discernment will never be between good and bad. That's a decision. Discernment is always between goods, which is why it's so challenging. It comes from the word to separate, as you know, rooted in the Latin, to actually be able to pull apart to see where is the call of God for us. It has to do with an ability to perceive, and perceive beyond our senses. So a lot of it isn't going to make sense to our rational minds. So if you try to rationalize your way through discernment, you're going to hit a wall at about 100 miles an hour. Okay? That's not the process. The process is the ability to be able to perceive, like kind of under the words. For instance, if I said to you, that this table up here, if I said, what are your favorite colors? And the colors were, red, purple, blue, and, yellow. Right? And if I said to this table here, what did they just say their favorite colors are? Right? At a rational level, you'd repeat back to me their colors. At a perception level, you would say, what I heard them say is vitality, and bold, and colors that demand attention. Do you see the difference? Okay? Discernment is always about perception. So you have to listen under the words. It's about nuanced insights. In discernment, something's probably not going to come down and hit you over the head. It's going to be much more nuanced than that. And it's the ability in this last dot here to see and recognize that which is not readily apparent by way of the stuff we like to use, which is data. We love data, don't we? And feelings. Please hear me say data and feelings are part of it, but they're only a part of it. So when I have here listed on the top part of the conversation here, we are now at a new stage of our journey. This moment of Paschal Mystery, what does it look like? It looks like this rhythm of transformation, where we've got to get into this pattern that we're not used to being in. We're very good at change. We're very good at decision making. Where we are now is a moment of transformation that needs discernment. And discernment can only happen through contemplation. I mean, that's the core of it. The second piece I have here is about graces, because I think the other piece that defines where we are at this stage in our journey, a new stage, is about graces that are both received and resisted. There's a lot of resistance to graces going on out there, everywhere. Government, country, healthcare, you name it, and religious life. Please notice how I keep using that whole line. We can't say anything about ourselves in this room that we can't say about the larger world. And whatever's going on in the larger world is going on here. So there's a lot of resistance to graces. What does it look like when you receive a grace? Well, it looks like there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of confidence. There's a lot of fidelity, joy, hope, solidarity, and clarity. So when you've got those things in you and around your table and in the room, when you've got that, then you know that you are receiving some pretty powerful graces for the transformational journey. We usually know that. What's it look like when graces are resisted? And again, if I asked you at your tables to have a conversation about, I don't know, what is our government resisting now by way of graces? What do you see that are graces that the government is saying, no, we don't want to go there, but the grace is being given? It's a whole lot easier to critique somebody else, right? But I'm going to apply the critique to us now. When we resist the graces, the ones that are most resisted are hope. And again, not here, but I hear a lot of lack of hope when we talk about religious life. Oh, we don't have any new members. Well, actually, that's not true. We do have new members, you know. Oh, we don't have the ministries anymore. Oh, I can't go out anymore. I can't do any. I just pray. You know, I hear some pretty significant evidence of I wonder where hope has gone. Okay? And as soon as hope goes, what's right on its tail is joy. So if you want to know the graces that are resisted, they are usually the graces of hope. And you think about our country right now and the political situation. The lack of hope. When you talk to people, they're like, oh my God, I just don't know how we're ever going to get out of this. That's the same comment that we hear from sisters and associates across the country. I don't know how we're ever going to get through this. Okay? Joy goes right after it. And the third grace that's usually resisted is vulnerability. Because we don't like vulnerability. In our culture especially, we don't like it. What does that create? When you resist those three graces, these are transformational graces, hope, joy, and vulnerability. You can't get through transformation without these graces. What does it produce when we resist those graces? See if you recognize any of this in the larger culture or maybe in your culture. Unrest. Cynicism. Fear. Preoccupation with whatever it might be. I was with the community a little while ago, and the talk around the community was, when do you think the new chairs are going to come in? Okay. And again, I mean, I relocated last year, and I waited for my chair to come. I know what that feels like. When the conversation everywhere, preoccupation, myopic, that what we're looking at all the time is through a lens that's usually mine, about Carol, myopic, or maybe about Philadelphia, or maybe about the United States, or maybe about humans, you know, myopic. The other fruit of a grace resisted is self-centered. That everything that's happening, the reference point is me. The other evidence of resisting hope and joy and vulnerability is privilege. In religious congregations, it usually sounds like, well, that whatever's happening to those groups, that's not going to happen to us. After all, we're the sisters of blank. You know, sense of privilege. And right next door to that, of course, is entitlement. Apathy. I'll pray for you, do whatever you want. I'm not going to be here 10 years from now. So either that or we elected you leaders, we trust you, go ahead and lead. Then, of course, when they do try to lead, then there's another story. So this evidence, if you will, of resisting hope and joy and vulnerability shows up in some apathy. Evasion. It's like, well, actually the conversation we should be having is this over here, but who wants to touch that with a 10-foot pole? So we'll talk about this over here. Okay. Another one is a sense of disruption, that life's being turned upside down, and we're being turned upside down with it, and it's just very disruptive. And then an incredible prevailing sense of angst. Now, I would offer for your consideration that what's under those little stars there could be a pretty good description of lots of places in our country, in our church, in healthcare, among our immigrant brothers and sisters. In other words, there's plenty of evidence, it seems to me, that the graces of transformation, hope, joy, and vulnerability are being resisted. And as long as they're resisted, the Christmas story is still alive. If there's no room in the inn, then Jesus will not come in. So we can actually keep transformation at bay. So does that make sense? Okay. All right. So I'm going to invite you, I think, to a little break maybe in a minute. And then when you come back, I'm going to invite you into some, a conversation. But I want to end with this. So what is needed in order to kind of step into this transformational moment with the skills that we need of contemplation and communal discernment is, first of all, to dialogue. And let me tell you, dialogue is not easy. It's not easy. There has to be a desire to listen. We have to learn to listen. This third one's a big one. Listen without an agenda. Do you ever listen to somebody and, you know what she's going to say before she finishes it? Listen under the words, like the colors, the example that I just gave a minute ago. Listen to hear the heart, and listen for the presence. Listen to God speaking, not Mary Ann. Listen to God speaking in Mary Ann. A sense of encounter. Francis uses this a lot. To actually encounter. What does it mean to encounter? It means, first of all, a willingness to fully meet the other. Now, I'll tell you, it's a little challenge for most of us. Because we know each other so well, we do not expect anything different from one meeting to the next. Because we know each other so well. What I want to encourage you to consider when you have your conversation after the break, imagine that Jesus himself is sitting in the chair around the table. I bet you'd be watching every eyebrow that he raises. You wouldn't want to miss a sigh. You wouldn't want to miss him just kind of... That's the kind of willingness to fully meet each other, to really be in one another's presence. And it's hard for us because we know each other so well. We don't expect anything new. The ability to both meet and be impacted by the other. An encounter is not being a tourist. Okay? It's to actually be changed and transformed by someone else. An encounter is an intentional commitment to transformation. I want to be in this conversation with you after the break at the table because I first of all want to meet the God in you, to hear the God in you speak to this moment in time, because I don't know what the God in you is saying. I don't even know what the God in me is saying. And I want to do it in a way that I am going to be transformed by what you say. Now, you're probably very good at that, but I'll tell you, it's another example where most religious are not. Because there's usually at least one person at a table who does know it all, and does have the answer. And that, if everybody else at the table could just kind of wake up and smell the coffee, we could get on with this, So it's challenging to meet each other with the intention of being transformed by each other. And the last one there, the readiness to experience the mystery of God. So what it needs basically is what Francis says from the Joy of the Gospel. It needs love over fear. And how do you know that fear is functioning in yourself or in a group? Well, fear functions as certitude. When people want something, just tell me when it's going to be finished. what they're saying is, I don't care if it's correct, what you're telling me, but tell me, give me a date, because I just can't stand like not knowing. Okay? That's a surface example. What's deeper usually under fear is that it functions as certitude. Because one of the things humans are not good at is ambiguity. And we've got a lot of it going on. It also, secondly up here, it masks as control. Some people who say that they're afraid and they're just not sure, what they're really saying is, I feel totally out of control here and I don't like it. I feel like we don't know what we're doing and I don't like it. We've never not known what we're doing. We've always been kind of ahead. And now I feel like we're not. And then finally, fear hides vulnerability. So the fear's a pretty significant factor. And that's why the show's called Fear Factor, on TV. It's a very significant factor in discernment, in contemplation, and in transformation. So how do you conquer that? You conquer it with love. Love over fear every single time. Looking at, in this case, others, but looking at everything with the very eyes of God. That's what contemplation is. And then to listen to each other, to hear what God is saying. So I want to just take just a little pause of some quiet and just ask you to just kind of glance at those two questions there, because that's what we're going to pick up with when we come back. Your own experience of this contemplation and discernment, this long, loving look, this step into vulnerability, this letting go of being in charge, this engagement with mystery, whatever words you want to use, but this experience of contemplation and trying to discern, what is God asking of me at this moment in time? And then the second question, of course, is the plural. What is God asking of us? Let's just take some quiet, and then we'll take a break. So we're going to take about a 20-minute break, and when we come back after the break, I'm just going to take just a few minutes to see, does anybody want to say anything, offer anything, and then we're going to step into the communal discernment process at your tables. Okay? So 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, sisters. Thank you. Even as we have people coming in, if everybody could just sit down, we need first of all, we're so happy so many are here. We're even much more than we thought we were going to have. So people who are in the back, sitting in chairs, there's 4 seats up here and 6 seats up here. So if you feel comfortable enough to walk up, we have 3 chairs here and 4 over here, so that we could be at table. And Gloria's raising her hand. 2 over there, 1 over there, 1 back there. People who have room at your table, just raise your hand. And those people from the back who are not at a table, if you could come up. Now, the second thing to raise your hand now is, we're looking at the paper, Trust in an Unknown Future. If you do not have the paper that says Trust in an Unknown Future, would you raise your hand?
So welcome back. And now that you have all the papers, could you find the paper that has the hymn, One Spirit, One Church? Do we know this? Oh, there's a table over there that needs that. Do we know this hymn, Sisters and Associates and Brother? Yep, okay. All right, let's begin this part of our time together by literally calling on the Spirit. And one of the pieces that so attracts so many people to this particular version of the hymn is that it really does blend what was and what is in such a beautiful way. So, let's call on the Spirit. We are a pilgrim people, we are the Church of God, a family of believers, disciples of the Lord, united in one Spirit, ignited by the fire, still burning through the ages, still present in our lives. Come, Holy Ghost, Creator blessed, and in our hearts take up thy rest. Come with thy grace and heavenly aid, to fill the hearts which thou hast made. We are a pilgrim people, we are the Church of God, a family of believers, disciples of the Lord, united in one Spirit, ignited by the fire, still burning through the ages, still present in our lives. O Comforter, to thee we cry, thou gift of God sent from on high, thou fount of life and fire of love, the soul's anointing from above. We are a pilgrim people, we are the Church of God, a family of believers, disciples of the Lord, united in one Spirit, ignited by the fire, still burning through the ages, still present in our lives. Amen. Thank you very much. I apologize for the alto. All right, let's just take a few moments, as promised, to see is there anyone that would like to offer anything. I usually hesitate to say ask anything because it presumes an answer, but we'll be happy to entertain anything that might be a question. Is there a microphone that's going to walk around? Is that what I see? Yes? Oh, two microphones. Two Vanna Whites. Very good. Okay. All right, is there anyone that would like to put anything into the room? Any thought, observation, comment? Outstanding bill? Yes, please, in the back.
I can't stand up, so. I'm an associate, so I understand, as much as I can about your community. But for me, what this is striking is I've just had some medical changes. I'm not able to walk like I used to. And I'm going to retire at the end of the year. So there's a lot of stages of my journey that, as Sister was speaking today, is hitting me personally, not just, for the community. So I appreciate this.
Thank you. Are we okay? Okay. All right, thank you. So what I'd like to invite you to now, and I'm not going to ask you to do this, that's on the screen, so don't worry. But I would hope that your spirit is there, okay? I don't know, maybe I should ask you to do that, Who knows? Could be fun, I've noticed that there's a nice red sign there that says where the ambulance entrance is, so so you'd be in good hands. So what we're going to engage now for the time between now and lunch is really from the mystical contemplative life. It is an opportunity to kind of be together in the heart of God, to be in this contemplative communal discernment space. And what I want to just invite you to consider is, as we experience ourselves as a whole on, as part of something larger and larger, imagine the families who are struggling with whatever they might be struggling with, if they could sit around a table as a family. Imagine our Congress, if they could sit around, metaphorically, a table, and just be in this kind of listening and trying to listen to where is God calling us. So again, just kind of don't think of this just for yourselves. And of course, what the cosmology tells us is that everything we do affects the energy in the universe. So for anybody who feels like this is just more talk, and what are we going to accomplish? You're putting energy out there in the universe that is contemplative and healing. So you're already changing the world. Okay? And it's only 11 o'clock in the morning, so good on you, as they say in Australia. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just kind of get into this mode of really saying yes to a way of life, to this contemplative way of living, a way of relating, and really to a way of the heart. I'm not going to ask you to do this either, but in some ways it might be a good image for you to keep in mind as you engage with each other. And you can keep to yourself who at your table you think is which. That will just be between you and your God, But this is a process where you carry each other and look at where you're going, on a rope that there's no turning back, at least that's not in view, and not really sure where it's headed either. Okay, so I don't know, guys, sometimes pictures just really help me a lot. This is an experience of carrying each other. I'm not going to ask you to do this either. But I have a friend of mine who is an acrobat, and one of the things that he has helped me to understand is that this is an incredible discipline. And it is an experience of trust, vulnerability, hope, confidence, joy, carrying each other, no going back, and not sure what's going to happen next. Okay? Basically, he has said to me that this is an exercise in physics. That space between their two outreached arms, a lot of images have the word trust written in there. That what he has said to me, though, is that there is, I can't tell you the mathematical number, but it is like the minutest aspect of a millisecond, where each of those artists has to intuit when it is time to let go and when it is time to reach out. And they have that minuscule aspect of a millisecond to both make the decision and do it. And if they miss, what he said is that he has seen shoulders pulled out and wrists pulled out. In other words, that sweet spot, which is what they call it, the sweet spot of trust, takes what Malcolm Gladwell talked about in his book, Outliers. It takes about 10,000 hours of practice. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's a very interesting piece. He said he did some research on why Canadians are such good hockey players. And one of the things he found out is that by the time most Canadian young boys especially are in 7th grade, they've been on the ice 10,000 hours. When musicians all over the world audition for a symphony, it's always a blind audition. The 3 people that are judging, the person that's auditioning is in front of a screen. And typically the professionals know in the first 3 notes whether that person has passed the 10,000 hour practice mark. Point. There's something about a skill being developed that needs at least 10,000 hours. And my friend told me that every partner that these people work with, it's another 10,000 hours. It's not like once you get it with one partner, then you have it with the next partner. Okay? I share that because what we're going to experience today is far from 10,000 hours of practice of contemplative communal discernment. So, for those of us in the room who are, probably nobody in this room, but I'll tell you, lots of us are like antsy with this kind of stuff. It's like, oh God, just come on, get on with it. I'm going to share what I think, share the state of the heart, and yeah, God's moving on my life, and no, this is not that. Okay. So the process is this. There is what's referred to as a home table, which is where you are now. Okay. And at the home table, there obviously are diverse individuals. You're going to engage in a process of contemplative listening and speaking. And the listening, of course, is you're listening simply to understand. And if you're going to test whether you're listening or not, if you've got a little voice in the back of your head that's saying, it's 5 after 11, I should have gotten another cup of coffee. I'm not sure if I'll make it till lunchtime. You're not listening, okay? So it's a little way of testing, so really listening. You listen simply to understand, not listening to say, oh, yep, I agree with that. Oh, yep, she's been saying that for 37 years, not surprised. Oh, nope, that's a stupid thing. Oh, that's never going to work, So you need 10,000 hours of practice to really listen. And speaking in contemplative work is simply speaking to be understood. You don't speak to convince. It's a totally different reason for speaking. And there's no talking, by the way, in contemplative work. You don't talk, you speak. And did you see the movie A League of Their Own several years ago, the baseball team, and Tom Hanks was the coach, I forget who the actress was, but she got out at second base and she started to cry on second base. Tom Hanks comes running out of the dugout and he said, are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying in baseball. There is no crying in baseball. There is no talking in contemplative processes. You speak. Okay? And one of the practices is to pause in between, and I know you know this rule book because you've been practicing it. Pause in between. Listen to the I that's on its way to a we. So listen to each individual, but begin listening not for, okay, now she said 3 of the same things and she said 4 of the same things. We got 3 people at this table who agree and 2 people who think something. That's discussion. Okay? You're listening for all the I's, and out of the I's there is some we-ness that emerges. And the questions, of course, are what do we hear us saying? What do we hear God saying? Now the last point up here is the part of the practice. The response that your home table will come to is not a consensus, but a discerned we. We hear God saying to us that our description of communal experience of contemplation and discernment is. And the answer to that is 8 to 15 words only. In contemplative practices, it's referred to as distilled thought. Okay? And again, you're probably really good at this, but let me tell you, a lot of us, in order to say something, we need 8 paragraphs and a couple of stories thrown in. Okay? Distilled thought, that's why all the silence is necessary. So that we're not running our mouth with everything that we think. Now, where are the extroverts, by the way? Extroverts, be proud, raise your hands. Extroverts. Is that all the extroverts? No way. Extrovert. Where are the introverts? Where are the people who don't know who they are? Okay. This kind of process is an introvert's dream. Okay? And for the extroverts, it's a journey to Dante's hell. Okay? See, because extroverts get at their distilled thought by having 800 to 1,000 words, right? Which is why the silence is such a help for all the introverts, okay? We don't have to listen to the extroverts. No, but seriously, it's a discipline for both styles, both introvert and extrovert. So my sense is, because I know that we've all across the country been trying to practice this way of being with each other in conversation, and I'm calling it now discernment. But the end goal is to have a distilled thought response that is common. And the suggestion is I'm actually being generous, it's usually 7 to 10 words, but I'm being generous, 8 to 15 words. And please do not wordsmith. It's not about getting all the right words, it's about listening. Listen under the words, and what you're listening for at your home table, I'm going to ask you to go right to the communal experience, because your own personal experience, you might want to share in another kind of venue. But the second question on your paper, how would you describe your communal, your Brentwood experience of contemplation and discernment? How would you describe it? So that will be the work that you're doing at your home table. Your goal is certainly listening to each one, and then getting your table to have a common distilled response of 8 to 15 words. Okay? Now let me just tell you where this is going so that the teachers in here know what the lesson plan is. Right? The second part of the process is, after a period of time, I will invite you to go, each of you, to go to another table. And it can be usually when this is done in a chapter process, you have the tables assigned and all. We're just practicing this today. But you will take, like if I'm at a table right now, a home table, when I go to another table, I'm with 6 or 7 or 8 other people who have been at 6 or 7 or 8 other tables. I do not take Carol's in to that communal table. I take my home table to that communal table. So it is a process by which, when you sit at your communal table, you're actually sitting with, in most cases, at least 25% of the room. You're having a conversation with 7 and 8 other tables. Do you see how that works? Okay? And the process is the same, except now at your communal table, you don't have diverse individuals. You have diverse tables. And everybody is there carrying their home communal discernment. So it's a real discipline to kind of let yourself go and make sure that you carry what your home table has discerned. And same process. Listen, speak, pause in between. Now you're listening to the we at the communal table that's really now a much larger we. It's almost like if I asked each of you now to come up here and sit with, people who are at, mostly tables have what, 2, 4, 6, 8, to sit with 8 other tables. Make a big circle of 8 tables. That's the second level of conversation you're going to have. It's an incredible way, process-wise, to be able to get a sense of what are we saying. And again, the response is the same at the communal table. In 8 to 15 words, what are we saying is our communal experience as Brentwood of contemplation and discernment. Okay? Is everybody clear on the process? It's actually pretty simple. Okay? Because it's the same process at each table. All right? Is everybody all right? All right, so I'm going to invite you, I have about 10 after 11, I'm going to invite you to about 20 minutes of home table. And again, this is practice, so just say to yourself, this is the first half hour of 10,000 hours of practicing this, okay? I say that because I'm sure there's somebody in this room that's like, oh my God, we've got 20 minutes. If she would just stop talking, we could get started, That's not going to help you, okay? So about 20 minutes to be with your home table, and your goal is to be able to carry what you as a home table have communally come to as a response to, what does this table think Brentwood's experience of contemplation and communal discernment is? Okay? All right, so I'll check with you in about 20 minutes, then I'm going to ask you to move to another table. And then it'll be time for lunch. All right? Okay. Again, don't forget all your skills. Look at each other. No comment in between. Just listen to everybody first, and then you can have contemplative conversation with each other. So this is not a discussion, and it's not a conversation. It is communal, contemplative discernment. Right? Very different process. So whenever anyone at your table is ready, feel free to begin. tables that need more time, you could spend the rest of the day on this wonderful conversation. Given what I see going on in the room, which is most important, that is lunch is coming, and we certainly don't want anything to happen to the lunch coming. So I'm going to do some rapid prototyping here, all right? I'm going to ask, and I'm going to give you a chance to think. I would like someone from maybe at least 6 or 7 tables to be able to come up here, and I'll need some microphones up here. We're going to have one communal table, rapid prototyping, and you're all going to be listening, to them, right? Because I'm afraid, because I know I just wasn't born this morning, so I'm afraid if we start moving around, we won't be able to get back. So here's the invitation. This afternoon you will move around, right? Here's the invitation. I'd like at least 6 tables. Are there 6 tables who feel confident enough that if one of you came up here, you have a sense of your table, okay? Right? So could you raise your hand if there are at least 6? Raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right. Could I have somebody from each of those tables come up here? Just one person from each of those tables. And some microphones, please. You're just going to stand right here. Yeah. All right, I think we have somebody else. Do we have someone else? Okay. Okay, that's good. Are you coming up also? Okay, great. Wonderful. All right. So, the tables who have someone up here, raise your hands. Okay, you are all the Blessed Mother reading group. Very good. Okay? All right. I won't ask the tables who have nobody up here. No, I'm only teasing. Okay? All right. What I'm going to ask now, this is what you would do, this is what you will do this afternoon when you go to your communal table, all right? So at your communal table, you are now diverse tables, so however many people are up here, that's how many tables you represent, all right? Times how many people at each table, all right? So there's a lot of you up here, okay? So you're going to do the same process. You're just going to read what your table, no comment, no, well, we thought this, but we really like this word, but somebody didn't want to say that. You're just going to, all that stuff has to get out of our skill set, okay? And what we're all going to do, we're all going to listen as if we are sitting at these tables now, and we are hearing all 8 or 9, however many people are up here. So here's what you're listening for. What are you hearing being said communally? And I know, please do not be insulted, but I don't mean this to be insulting. We are not summarizing something. This is not a book report, okay? You are listening under the words. So whatever you're hearing should probably not be any of these words. You're going to be hearing deeper, okay? Under the words, all right? So we have microphones up here, so when you read it, you don't have to tell us what table you are, because the other thing in a communal discernment process, sisters and associates and brother, is that the I, once you say something at your home table, that is your contribution. If you keep going to the next table and keep saying what you said at the next table, you are just repeating Carol, 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 Carol. Okay? So that's one thing that happens in communal discernment. The other thing that happens in communal discernment is there's no open mic. There's no need in a communal discernment process for the prophetic voice to get up there and try to influence the whole. That's a different process. It's not bad. That's not a communal discernment process. If something is of God, it will carry. But it has to be carried by the body. It doesn't, notice my gesture, it gets carried by the body from under not carried by the body like I'm doing right now, speaking over all of you. Do you see the difference? Okay? Right? So I'd invite you just to kind of quiet yourself. And again, you're not going to be listening to the first person who speaks. Oh, that's exactly what our table said. Oh, geez, we should have used that word. Okay? No. No. Clear it out. Clear it out. Right? So we're going to listen. I'm going to ask you to repeat them twice. Each person will speak theirs twice. Right? Just listen. Don't take any notes. Just listen. Right? So we're going to hear now from this number of home tables. What did you hear when you heard at your table the description of the communal Brentwood experience of contemplation and discernment? We'll start here, please.
We've grown in comfortableness with silence, with ourselves, and with one another. We're able to see, hear, and be open to different perspectives. We've grown in comfortableness with silence, with ourselves, and one another. We're able to see, hear, and be open to different perspectives.
There is a God-given desire and hunger for God, but we struggle with the process of contemplation and dialogue. There is a God-given desire and hunger for God, but we struggle with the process of contemplation and dialogue.
We've grown in comfort with listening and with the process, and are experiencing it more fruitfully. Uncoupling our expectations of our outcomes, but it's still a struggle. We've grown in a comfort with listening with the process, and our experience is becoming more fruitful. We're growing in uncoupling our expectations of outcomes, but we still struggle with that.
Regarding contemplative discernment, we have the desire and the innate sense of why, but we need help with the how. Regarding contemplative discernment, we have the desire and an innate sense of the why, but we need help with the how.
There is a growing trust among us, yet we are still challenged in sharing our vulnerabilities and getting out of our headspace. There is a growing trust among us, yet there is still a challenge in sharing our vulnerability and getting out of our headspace.
Although it is difficult, we value and yearn to participate, but need to be more vulnerable and free. Although it is difficult, we value and yearn to participate, but need to be more vulnerable and free.
We are committed individually to increase our abilities in contemplation, and we are growing in understanding how to do that as a group. We are committed individually to increasing our ability in contemplation, and we are growing in our understanding of doing this as a group.
at your tables now, this is just going to be individual. You have just been at a communal table. What you would do next would be contemplative listening and speaking, pausing in between. Listening now for the larger we. What were these 7 or 8 tables saying? Not 7 or 8 individuals, 7 or 8 tables. And what is God saying? So I invite you to just about 3 minutes of quiet, and just for yourself, if you would write down just for you, what did you hear God saying about Brentwood's communal experience of contemplation and discernment from these 8 tables? 3 minutes of quiet, and in that quiet, if you would jot down your common response, 8 to 15 words. When we come back after lunch, I'm going to invite you at your tables to just share, what you heard from this communal table experience. And then we're going to shift the conversation this afternoon, same process, but the conversation about what does it mean to say, as you said in 1982, we voice our vision for the future. What are you seeing as you look at the future around the mission and charism of religious life? And we'll look specifically at elements of living the life and the leadership question. What is needed from leadership at this moment in time? So that'll be this afternoon. Okay. So again, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but it is in fact what this process does. You carry each other, literally. And also, just to let you know that there's a lot of movement in chapters now, as you probably know. Chapters are being done very, very differently. And even chapters of election are done in this kind of process. No more writing names on a newsprint and nobody knows exactly where they came from, you know. I mean, the table might have said this or that. Everything is done in discernment, which means you sit and you look at each other, you know, and you do your sharing. What is God saying to you? Where do you think you're being called? Who among you do you think God is calling to be of service and leadership for the next 4, 5, or 6 years? So this process, it is very vulnerable, you know. I mean, you just really kind of have to be in it and offer what you offer, and let God take it where God takes it. Okay. So what I'd like to do is close with just the refrain of that Spirit hymn as we ponder these lovely pictures. What a wonderful image before we go to lunch, you know. As you carry each other, literally, from where you have been, it is no longer what it was, right? Does anybody else get that besides me? You know? Just like they're leaving, you know, what's behind them. It's no longer visible. So whatever was isn't anymore. And where they're going isn't really clear. It's a great image, I think. And of course, you just had your, at least in this process, your first 45 minutes of your 10,000 hours to find your sweet spot. How can you be in this together and let God do what God wants to do in you? Trusting always that the Spirit is the one that is guiding. And so we close our morning with the refrain, and I think we begin at 1 o'clock. Is that correct? 1 o'clock for lunch? Okay, thank you. We are a pilgrim people. We are the Church of God, a family of believers, disciples of the Lord, united in one spirit, ignited by the fire, still burning through the ages, still present in our lives. Thank you very much for a wonderful morning. Have a good lunch. You want to look at this picture during lunch, or you want to look at this picture during lunch?